Well, good morning everybody. Insights channel here. Steve here again. And today I'm going to talk to you about what I was mentioning last time. I was talking last time about my new Insights book, ESDRAS Insights. And I was also reading a few verses from the book of Job. Now I'm going to expand upon what I did last time, because I think it's a very interesting topic that comes up again and again in both the Bible and the Apocryphal books. And that is that if you study the prophets in the Bible, and you study some of the prophets in the Apocrypha too, that when they got in very difficult circumstances, personally or as a nation, they cried out to God for deliverance. But the point I tried to bring out last time was that God didn't always deliver his prophets right away, or the nation of Israel. In fact, instead of answering their immediate questions, God often came along with a dialogue of his own, and he would talk to them from A to Z before he would actually talk about the problems they were talking about. And I think the big question is, why would you do that? When you know the pain that Job was in, for example, covered in boils and great suffering. And in the case of Ezra, the whole nation of Israel had been taken to captivity, terrible sufferings that he mentions in 2nd Esdras. What happened to their women, what happened to their young men, what happened to the so much slaughter of their nation. And you imagine in such dire pain and anguish that God will come along and say, okay boys, yeah, I'm going to heal you, I'm going to deliver you right now. But he doesn't say that. I brought out the point last time was, I believe that the reason for this, in other chapters in the Bible with other prophets, God will start off the first chapter, like say in Isaiah. He will start by telling what's wrong with the nation, why they're in such a mess. He has done that with some of the prophets. But on another occasion, like here, God is giving a whole history lesson. Last time we only read from Job 38, but this time I'm going to give you a synopsis of all the remaining chapters of Job from 38 to 42. Because I think it's amazing. And I think it's important to think about, because nobody could have suffered more than Job. Nobody could have had more pain and suffering than he went through. Just imagine from all covered in boils, having your three-breast wise friend practically cursing out and say you must be wicked for God to have done such a terrible thing to you, blaming it on God when actually it was Satan that brought all the afflictions. And his house caved in with all his kids inside and they all died. And his wife was there standing there saying, why do you hold your integrity, Job? Curse God and die. So it's a pretty awful situation to be in. But he maintained his faith. And then it says in Job 38, and the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. And as I brought out last time, the Lord brought out some amazing things. And he brought these things to Job's attention, of course, knowing that Job would tell mankind. And he brought out things that most people don't have a clue about concerning creation. And as I mentioned last time, it seems to indicate here that the earth is hollow. In this chapter, twice it mentions the earth being like a womb, or it says, verse 8, who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it issued out of the womb? And another one talks about the same sort of thing. But I'm going to move on now. So God's bringing out some very odd concepts about the original creation. This book of Job, Job lived about 4,000 years ago, or just after the flood. You can prove that, by the way. You can prove exactly when he lived. If you study the Bible and find out who he was the son of, etc., find out that his relatives lived just after the flood. But now I'm going to move on now from Job chapter 38, a few other exceptional verses. Here's verse 22 through 24. Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? That's very interesting, because that exact same verse is mentioned in the book of Enoch, chapter 100 verse 8. It is also mentioned in the first book of Enoch that I'm working on now. It says exactly that, the treasures of the snow. Why? What's it talking about? Well, look what it goes on to say here. It reveals more here. What does God say about the treasures of the snow? Which I have reserved against a time of trouble, against a day of battle and war. And you can find verses similar to that in Psalm 147, Psalm 148. So there's something about these treasures of the snow. But God goes on to say it's reserved for the time of trouble, against a day of battle and war. Is it some sort of judgment that we don't know about? Some sort of sudden ice age, you're saying? Well, as I've mentioned before, the powers that be always tell us something that isn't true, to catch everybody off guard. God, on the one hand, is trying to tell his prophets the truth, and Satan, through the world leaders and that, tells you the opposite. Catch people off guard. But here God in his word seems to say we've got something coming here. Treasures of the snow, and it's some sort of part of judgment. The only thing I can think of on that would be a sudden ice age, something of that order. The exact opposite of what people expect with their global warming, which, by the way, is just total nonsense. There's no truth in it. There's no proof to global warming at all. But that's another topic. I covered that already. Look at the next verse here. Job 38:24. By what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Now you're probably wondering, what's got light to do with the winds? Well, believe it or not, the scientists have found out that the light has a lot to do with the winds. The light and has a lot with changing the winds. And here you've got God telling Job about this sort of scientific fact 4,000 years ago. And by what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? So here God's saying there, the light has something to scattering the wind, which it does. You can prove that scientifically. And there are many other verses here, and these other ones I covered last time, like out of whose womb came the ice and hoary frost of heaven? Who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. That's talking about the hole in the north, or hole in the pole, where you go down, you'll find it's all frozen. There's ice barrier there. It's proved by explorers. Then the next verses talk about the importance of the stars. Canst thou bind the sweet infants of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth? That's the 12 constellations that affect the stars and affect the sun signs and makeup of each person and everything else. Or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons, another set of stars? So God's bringing out the point here to the importance of the stars. Of course, a lot of wise men know about the stars. They know about the 3 wise men, the birth of Jesus. The wise men know about stars. But at one time, astrology and astronomy were the same science. Now in modern times they separate them out. One's just pure mythology, like astrology. And astronomy, that's the real science. That's the attitude of the arrogant science of today, but it's nonsense. The astrology is what shows the powers that affect people on the earth. And God is bringing that out here in this chapter. He also said in Genesis the stars were for signs and seasons. In other words, they affect the seasons and they're signs of things to come. Like somebody wrote to me the other day and said, did you know that the signs of the heaven are going to be on the 19th September 2023? It's going to show what it shows in Revelation 12 in the stars. Well, I don't know, I haven't been able to see the stars here. It's always cloudy here in Scotland, but hope somebody might be able to see that. Well, somebody sent that to me in South America. Andre, maybe he's right. I don't know. But that's about the stars too, that there's some sort of sign today, 19th September, that relates to what the description in Revelation chapter 12 about the woman and the dragon. Interesting topic. Actually, this book here of Job talks about dragons in a minute. The question is why? But just to finish off this chapter here so I don't miss anything important. Verse 35. Canst thou see lightnings, that they may go and say unto thee, Here we are. Now what a perfect description of telecommunications that we have today. Here's God talking to Job 4,000 years ago about things like the telephone. That's exactly how a telephone is. Oh, hello, here I am. Who's that? What does it say here? And how does it get sent? It gets sent through a wire like lightning, electricity, right? Same speed of light. Canst thou send lightnings, that they may go and say unto thee, Here we are, oh hello. Right? It's all about the telephone, clearly, 4,000 years ago. So as I said, with God, it doesn't matter if it's the beginning or the end, the Alpha or the Omega. God knows the whole picture. So he could talk to Job about things before him, the original creation, and he can also talk to him about the far future, like about what we have today, telephones. So that's a clear verse there about telephones, telecommunication. That's in Job 38:35. And here's another very interesting verse here, 37. Who can number the clouds in wisdom? Or who can stay the bottles of heaven? I think that's bringing to us the importance of clouds. The clouds are very important. I won't get into that more, I talked about it last time. But now I want to get on to these other remaining chapters. So remember the circumstances that Job is terribly afflicted. Couldn't be in a worse situation for any human being, right? Suffering all that. And yet instead of God saying, okay, Chango, presto, by my word you are healed, Job, on the spot. No, it doesn't say that. He gives him this big lecture about all this stuff I've been telling you about. And the next one he's talking about all the animals and how God takes care of all the animals and how they do different things. And then in chapter 39:20, God brings up something really strange. You see, he starts describing a dragon. But why? He said, the glory of his nostrils is terrible. He poureth the valley and rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet armed men. Now here's interesting, because in these chapters now, God mentions dragons. He mentions something like a brontosaurus or behemoth. And he mentions the biggest monster, the Leviathan, which is like a sea dragon, but absolutely monstrous in size, so big that it's undiscoverable and lives in the very depths of the sea. So that is, and this monster, Leviathan, is mentioned in the book of Enoch as well. And it's also mentioned in my other book that just came out, ESDRAS Insights, or in the Apocryphal book, Second ESDRAS, also mentions about these two kinds of monsters. One seems like a brontosaurus and the other seems like a Leviathan we're not familiar with. All we know about Leviathan, it's like a dragon but much bigger. Absolutely, probably hundreds and hundreds of feet long. Absolutely monstrous. And people shouldn't say there don't exist dragons. Look it up. They're finding skeletons of these things. Some of them are absolutely massive over in China. So dragons do exist. So anyway, why would God go to the trouble of talking to Job about brontosauruses and mentioning that brontosaurus does not eat meat? Then it mentions that these creatures were alive at the same time as man. Well, there goes evolution out the door. Yeah, if you want to know on creation, look up Kent Hovind, some of the best material. And he showed the same thing. Look, they found footprints of dinosaurs with a footprint of man inside it. So how could the dinosaurs live millions of years ago and man evolved much later? And that's not true. And here in the book of Job you can find that it says God created these monsters at the same time as man. So that's another very interesting point from a scientific point of view. But here's a description of the dragon. This is a smaller dragon. This is not Leviathan. It's a normal dragon. If you want to know about dragons, just study Marco Polo, who went to China about 1,000 years ago. He talked about dragons there. And you know about St. George and the dragon. There's more truth than myth than that. Look that up. And also there's another very interesting reference. If you look in Isaiah chapter 30, it's not the only place either. It talks about fiery flying serpents. What's that talking about? And such creatures were seen in Wales about 100 years ago. But I won't go more into that. But you'll find these topics are in my books. The dragons are covered in Out the Bottomless Pit, both books 1 and 2. They're talking about dragons. Dragons are very interesting creatures. Like some of them are very big, some are fiery. I mean, that's not fiery. Some can fly and some can't. What happened to them all? Well, that's a good question. I think I covered that last time, or maybe I didn't. I think the reason a lot of these big so-called mythological creatures, which I think they do exist. Also in this last chapter of Job, God mentions the unicorn. Very interesting. Now some people say, the unicorn, that's probably just a rhinoceros. I'm not so sure. I mean, it does say it's strong. But I don't know, was there a mystical creature, the unicorn or horse with a very long horn? Was there such a creature? Anyway, God mentions it in his remaining chapters of Job for whatever reason. And I thought it's very interesting here. Here's a description of the dragon. He poureth a valley and rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed man. People are trying to attack this thing. He mocketh at fear. He is not afraid. Neither turneth he back from the sword. The quiver rattleth against him. The glittering spear and the shield. I can't do anything with a spear against this creature. Must be very big. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness and rage. Neither is he afraid of the sound of the trumpet. In other words, not afraid of people coming against this creature, man and his weapons. And he saith among the trumpets, ha ha, he smelleth the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. That's worth reading there in Job 39. Okay, that's pretty much the end of 39. And now, like I mentioned before, it mentions Behemoth. This is another big monster, but it's not a fire-breathing dragon or something, or Leviathan. This is a bit more peaceful. It says in Job 40:15, behold now the Behemoth, which I have made with thee. Look at that. It wasn't made millions of years before man. Oh no, evolution got that wrong. It was made with thee. He eateth grass and ox. And lo, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. You know what a cedar is? One of the tallest trees in the world. And the sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. Where does he live? He lieth under the shady trees in the covert of the reed and fens. The shady trees cover him with their shadow. The willows of the brook compass him about. Behold, he drinketh of a river. A pretty big creature, huh? And hasteth not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan in his mouth. He taketh it with his eyes. Now it's very interesting because this monster, this is one of the monsters, Leviathan's the other. But it says in the book of Enoch, and also in 2nd ESDRAS, see in my books, it talks about, in the beginning, God created these monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth. But he said the sea itself was too small to contain them, so he separated them out. He left Leviathan in the sea, and he put Behemoth on the land somewhere. Now that's interesting, because modern man likes to tell us, oh no, dinosaurs, they lived millions of years ago, and dragons and that are just mythology, they're not real. It's all nonsense what they say, they've got it all completely wrong. Did you know down in the country that's got the biggest lake in the world, down in the Congo, they have the biggest swamp area in the world. And what have they seen in there in modern times? This very creature, dinosaurs. They've seen Behemoth or something like a brontosaurus down there in the Congo jungle near the lake. Where's he living? He's living just like God said he would, in the covert of the reed and the fens, shady trees covering with their willows. And where is he? In the river. So, why would God go to the trouble of telling Job all these things in Job's great suffering? I think it's for importance. God is saying, yeah, you're suffering, but I've got something more important for you to never forget. And there's no better time to remember when you're suffering. I'm going to tell you how I really made the world, how it really is. And I'm going to tell you about creatures and happenings for a reason. And now the next chapter, 41, is talking about nothing but Leviathan himself, and saying this is a creature so big, dragon-like, that breathes fire out of his mouth, and it causes all the water to boil. It's so big, and he says that nothing can stop this creature. And it's very interesting, at the end of this chapter, it says something that could only be a reference to Satan himself. Of course, we know that Satan is represented by a dragon, a red dragon, according to Revelation 12. He says, upon earth there is not his like, who is made without fear. He beholdeth all the high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. What a description of Satan. And yet that, ladies and gentlemen, is a description of Leviathan, biggest creature ever created by God. I would mention that when Enoch mentions that God separated out these original monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth, because there wasn't enough ocean, he also mentioned in the beginning there was only 1/7 of the earth was water. The rest was earth at one time. That's before the floods came and all that. And then the last chapter is finally Job. God deals with his immediate problems, and he says, so this is chapter 42, last chapter of Job, verse 12. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning. For he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He called the name of the first Jemimah, the name of the second Keziah, the name of the third Keren. And in all the land there were no women found so fair as the daughters of Job. And the father gave them inheritance among their brethren. And after this, here's another important point. Job lived 140 years, saw his sons and sons, even 4 generations. So Job died being old and full of days. I mentioned that Job had already lost one family of 10 kids. Now he has another one. And he lived another 140 years, which means he'd already lived a good 100 years before that. So, yes, you'll find in the Apocryphal books it states that Job was 240 years old when he died. As you know, Abraham was a mere... What was Abraham? He was 175 when he died. His son Isaac was 180 when he died. Abraham's father died when he was 205. So Job being 240 would be a strong indication that he lived before that time. Probably 100 years or so before Abraham, or a few hundred years after the flood. But I think it's incredible to know all the things that God brought up, all these interesting things that he brought up. A lot of these things I've mentioned are controversial things. A lot of people say, well, there doesn't exist monsters like that, does there, in the sea? And there doesn't exist brontosauruses today and dragons and stuff, does there? Unicorns? That's all fantasy, isn't it? Well, I think Satan is the one who likes to make people think that everything is mythology and everything is relegated to the far distant past. But is it true? The truth is, when you investigate things, you'll find in different countries and different cultures, especially in places like China, they have skeletons of massive dragons. Yeah, look it up. You'll find there's a lot of amazing things mentioned in those last 5 chapters of Job that are well worth investigating topic by topic. I think it's fantastic how God has mentioned so many things in these chapters. So many things that I've mentioned, just a few of them. But I would encourage everybody to investigate those last 5 chapters of Job. Look them up. Look into the science of it. Look into the history of it. Look into the mythology of it. Look into every area. And you'll be amazed by what you find. And I'm convinced God did it for a reason. Like I said, he didn't just immediately come along and, hey, presto chango, solve Job's problems. And the same with Ezra, I would say in my book, Ezra's Insight, which is based on the Apocryphal book, 2nd Esdras. God didn't solve Israel's problems right away either. He had a reason. He had a reason. He did eventually. And he used Ezra himself to bring Israel back into power. Yes. He had the favour of the emperor. Went back to Jerusalem and rebuilt the place and the temple and everything. Along with Nehemiah and a whole bunch of other pals. Great stuff. But I'll put in the case of Ezra, he spent 40 days fasting. 7 days at a time, and then God's angel Uriah came to him and talked to him and was asking him similar questions like he did with Job, and giving lots of answers about things. And of course, when God takes his time to explain so many things like that, it doesn't get forgotten. Thus we have the book of Job, and we have the apocryphal book of 2nd EZRAS. Well, that's just a little synopsis on the book of Job there, the last 5 chapters. I think it's fantastic material, absolutely fantastic. But you'll find it's backed up, like I said, by other books, by the book of Enoch, by 2nd EZRAS, by other books as well. I'm having a fascinating time working now on the 2nd book of Enoch. Chock full of amazing information. I have to take it out little by little. I'll make it into a book eventually. I'm working on it. Anyway, everybody, thanks so much for listening. I would encourage everybody, please do get my new book, ESDRAS Insights, that has a lot of secrets like the ones I was talking to you about today. Incredible stuff. So that's my new book, ESDRAS Insights, which actually has 3 books inside. It's got the 2 apocryphal books of 1st, 2nd EZRAS. It's also got a book I compiled called 4,000 Years of History from Creation to Christ, about 350 pages long. That's a valuable book, I believe. It's my books are study books. They are books to slowly go through and study and learn a lot of things you probably didn't know before. So thanks so much for listening. I now have I've brought out 10 books so far. 9 of them I'd say are the ones you can really buy, because the 2nd book I made, ESDRAS Insights, was only a small version of the latest one just brought out, ESDRAS Insights. So if you get a choice, go for the new one, ESDRAS Insights. That's a complete book. I put a lot more work into that one than my 2nd book, which is also called the same name, ESDRAS Insights. But my first attempt to do it was spelled with a Z, and the last attempt where I've done a fuller version is with S, ESDRAS Insights. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you learned something there about the book of Job and God coming in a whirlwind to talk about all of creation, how he did it from the beginning to the end, and revealing a lot of secrets of what's on the planet, like dinosaurs and stuff. I hope you enjoyed that. So thanks for listening. Bye for now.